Hi, you're tuned in for the Power and Energy news channel ESI Africa. For this episode, I am speaking with Patrick Mwesige, who is the MD of Kanara Solutions East Africa and a consultant for energy and extractives to the World Bank Group. Well, welcome to the studio, Patrick.
Thank you, Nicolette.
So, Patrick, in a recent article that you published in ESI Africa, you spoke about and I'll get the headline here, the distinction between asset management and managing assets.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
You gave a lot of insightful information around how a utility could actually go through that process.
Yeah.
But let's start with, what is the distinction?
Yeah. You see, Nicolette, many utilities spend lots of money installing assets in their network to serve different kinds of customers. But the installation becomes the biggest issue for the utility, and it's celebrated and it's magnified and published. But the real value in terms of service delivery transcends just installing assets. It comes from what actually the assets promise, because they promise economic benefits or service to the users. So the distinction, therefore, is it's not sufficient for one to have their assets and just make sure that they are working. But more so in asset management is to look at the asset from the point of view of planning up the point of decommissioning. Meaning that you are looking at the overall horizon in terms of time that the asset is going to be working for you. And yet in network assets like utilities, assets live in an ecosystem. Meaning that one asset has no value of its own without the rest. So asset management, therefore, challenges leaders and managers and, of course, operational engineers and technicians in utilities to look at the asset's life cycle in the context of the entire network. Meaning that as I install the asset today, I'm thinking about how will it serve its first year, its second year, up to probably the 20th year or the 50th year. That is the fundamental distinction.
Right. And this is a topic that we've been talking about for many years, yet it remains relevant.
Sure.
And I think perhaps it is because we've got new people coming into the industry and need to understand how this operates within a utility sector.
Okay.
If they were, for instance, in a different industry and they're coming into the utility sector, what do they need to know about managing their assets?
Utilities have some unique characteristics, that the bulk of their assets are long-term assets. And the other aspect is that they are networked, i.e. they don't provide you much service on their own. Now, for one to have a consistent service at the receiving end, the condition of this asset needs to be maintained at a certain level so that the value proposition in acquiring the asset is completely optimized. Recall that these are very expensive assets, but it's not uncommon, especially in our region, to find that an asset that was acquired and installed in the network to last 25 years, meaning that it was meant to deliver that consistent service for 25 years, or at least the bigger percentage of that, to find that by the 7th year, that asset is either due for refurbishment or even has completely been withdrawn, because over the 7 or 8 or 10 years of its 25-year lifetime, it's not been looked after carefully. So asset management, therefore, calls upon us from day one to start looking after the asset so that it can take us up to the 25th year of its lifetime. And therefore, these newcomers on the scene, like you say, need to be aware that we are in the process and in this environment of asset management and service delivery over the long haul. So on day one, we plan for what will happen on year 7, what will happen on year 11, what will happen on year 10, because 25 and so forth. We don't want to arrive at year 10 and we are not ready for the demands that the asset brings upon us in year 10. Because if that happens, it means that the chances are we will never reach year 20 of the asset's life.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
And even extending the asset's lifetime.
Exactly.
So looking at the industry as we stand, we're in a transition phase
Sure.
at the moment, and
Sure.
we have new technologies coming on board, and we're talking about collaboration here at
Yeah.
Enlit Africa.
Yeah.
If we look at asset management and managing assets,
Yes.
it is everybody's responsibility, or is there just the leadership of the utility that needs to look at that? Where would they start? What is the starting point for them? And what is the plan of action?
Yeah. From the point of view that asset management is understood and taken as a strategic concern for the utility, it means that this awareness has to permeate the entire organization. Recall that several of these assets have a lead time to come into being, especially if you're talking about transmission networks or generation plants. It takes like 4 or 5 years to actually come into being. So if we have our assets living a shorter life cycle than they should, it means that we'll have these intermittent gaps in our service delivery. Now you're talking about the coming into being of transition, but even the advent of technology. We have seen at Kanara Solutions that technology actually is a huge enabler for utilities to effectively manage and optimize their assets. Because like we said in that article, that several utilities are living in a season of data blindness, and yet we are in real season of data abundance in even other things other than utilities. So if utilities have installed systems and processes that enable visibility from strategic to operational level, it means that the information that different users have enables them to see the performance of their critical assets, meaning that they are able to preemptively take care of any emerging conditions within the performance of the asset that could have otherwise inhibited that maximization, optimization of value from these assets. So we are really in very interesting times, as far as on one hand we have the challenge of the transition, but on the other hand we have the advantage of this data and technology enablement that enables us actually to do much, much more than would have otherwise done 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Patrick, it was a very interesting article that you wrote with a lot of information in it.
Thank you,
so,
Nicolette.
as a last question, what
Yes,
is the one key takeaway from that article that you would like the viewers to read?
One of the key issues that the viewers need to understand is that we in this industry are there to ensure that as we transit, especially in the transition process, we need to transit in a manner that is economically sustainable, both for the service users, but even for the operators in utilities, and even for our shareholders and investors. It's critical, therefore, that each and every coin that has been vested in these assets is optimized. Then we'll survive the transition capably.
That's a very good point. Thank you so
you.
much for joining us, Patrick.
Thank you, Nicolette. Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to ESI Africa for more of this type of content.